Hi. Joining us today is Illia Polosukhin, co-founder of NEAR, a decentralized programmable blockchain that uses the proof-of-stake consensus algorithm. Welcome.
Thank you.
The first question is about your project. NEAR's token saw remarkable growth in early April. Could you talk a little bit about what caused that growth and what you're doing to make it sustainable?
Well, in general, for any market, there's more buyers than sellers when the price appreciates. But kind of the thing we're focused on is really about growing an ecosystem, right? And so I think kind of an interesting milestone we hit has been 500 projects that are building in the ecosystem. The kind of overall, the usage, the kind of sounds like great partnerships that have happened. And so for us, kind of the goals we set out are really around weekly active kind of engaged users and, you know, the projects and unicorns that are launched on the platform. And so for us, those are the goals. This is how, you know, if you think of foundation, of eco funds, of kind of the whole ecosystem, this is really what everyone's focused on.
In late December, NEAR introduced sharding. How has it performed so far? And what do you think the prospects of this tech are?
So for us, kind of since we started, sharding has been the only way we see blockchain scaling, right? And like every other alternative is pretty much saying, hey, we're gonna run a single machine that will process all the transactions, and you know, that's gonna be enough. So we don't believe that. We don't, like, similarly how Web 2 has not worked on single servers. We need sharding, we need parallel processing. And so kind of from the start, we designed with that in mind. We launched back in 2020, October, we launched with a single shard, exactly knowing that we'll not have enough usage to justify sharding. And that gave us time to actually test and develop more tooling. And so in pretty much mid-November last year, 2021, network has resharded, switched from 1 shard to 4 shards. There has been zero impact to the users, zero impact to developers or applications. Everything worked exactly like it was with 1 shard, and this is going to continue. So kind of NEAR is designed to abstract out all the complexity of scaling, all the complexity of sharding away from the developers and users. And so kind of throughout this year, we have, you know, a pretty big roadmap of continuing evolving both how sharding works. Like we want to redo some of the storage mechanisms, some other mechanics underneath, but none of this will impact kind of how developers and users are building. It will just become cheaper and faster, that's all. And so kind of the next, I would say, like fundamental milestone, I mean, there's like a few more milestones throughout this year. The next fundamental milestone is so-called dynamic resharding, is when the blockchain itself will actually grow number of shards when there's need in more capacity, and actually move around applications between shards kind of dynamically based on how they're used. And so that will kind of in a way match what you have with, you know, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, services like that, where you actually don't think about how many computers they have, the kind of infrastructure just works, and you have kind of your applications deployed. This is really what we want for developers on your ecosystem, is that they don't need to think about scalability. They know that they'll have low fees, they know they'll have enough throughput, and it will just work, and all the complexities handled by the kind of protocol underneath.
Mm-hmm. Now let's shift the gear a little bit. You are a native of Ukraine, and we are talking at a time when Russian invasion of Ukraine is in progress. I know that you were one of the founders of the Unchain Fund, which aims to help Ukraine. Could you talk a little bit about that and about the role that crypto could play in helping Ukraine?
For sure, yeah. So kind of when the war started, right, kind of everybody scrambled on how to help, right? A lot of us have family, have friends, you know, we have some even like people from the NEAR ecosystem who are fighting the war right now. And so we were trying to figure out how to help. And crypto became kind of the fastest way to deliver help directly to people and then actually distribute it. And so that was recognized both by kind of crypto community in Ukraine. A lot of founders in the community has been very active it also has been recognized by the government because they actually established a crypto kind of donation program, and they're distributing crypto and using crypto to buy various kind of supplies for the country directly. And so in general, this, like, for example, for Unchain Fund, it was from an idea, quick discussion, getting a multi-sig together, to setting up everything and ready to accept funds, to having a first, $1 million donated in less than a day, right? Like, you cannot imagine setting up a nonprofit, wiring money, getting donations in such a time. And so in general, it's just the kind of the sheer speed, the ability to then distribute it directly to people as well, right? To their wallets. They can either directly use, crypto exchanges to get to their cards, or pay directly with crypto as well, because a lot more people started accepting crypto. Has been, I would say, fundamental to be able to deliver help quickly. And then at the same time, if you think from a perspective of a Ukrainian, at this point, you don't know if the banks will actually stand, right? You don't know if National Bank of Ukraine will actually exist, right, when the war was starting. And so crypto has also become a place where you can move out assets to reduce kind of potential risks of the both local currency as well as just in general banks in Ukraine. And so from this perspective, crypto is also kind of, as a store of value, have been definitely a major player. And kind of we see even from like OTC market, for example, in Kiev, the USDT is trading above kind of its value like a fair bit, because a lot of people are trying to come into USDT directly in Kiev. So I think overall, and we see kind of this economy actually happening, right? Because as people move in, they're like, well, I want to pay with this directly, and people are willing to accept it as well because this reduces the volatility risk. So I would say like crypto became kind of, part of this engine that united people and helped them through this time. Obviously, we need this war to stop and start recovering from this. But yeah, it's been very fundamental to kind of deliver help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is basically a very important use case for crypto. Could you think about some other use cases for crypto that could apply in situations like that, in situations of conflicts, major economic crises, things like that?
So I think there are a few things that are happening right now which are really interesting. So one of them is UBI, like universal basic income type of models. So for example, Unchain Fund has been giving out cards which will be linked directly to the kind of crypto, to people, like to women with children who are right now don't have job, to kind of have a weekly stipend, right? And so this is type of UBI program that is actually helping people again on the ground. You can think a little bit more. Things like Svetcoin that we partnered about a week ago is something where you earn while walking, right? So this is kind of converting some of your movement to the kind of onboarding you into crypto. And so this actually can be a huge mechanism to onboard a lot of people who are potentially in crisis right now, who have no kind of resources to come into this ecosystem, have kind of first exposure to this. There is kind of a number of more global marketplaces of work, of kind of assets that exist on crypto, right? One of in Near, it's called NearCrowd, which is a crowdsourcing platform. And so again, this is a place where people can actually work to do crowdsourcing, to do data entry, and in turn earn crypto, which is global, which works, and they can pretty much earn a fair living with that. And this kind of is a marketplace that on the other side, companies like Google, like Facebook, OpenAI are actually paying millions of dollars for this data. So in general, I think what crypto does is kind of remove these borders for kind of more general marketplace, and people who are right now in crisis, by having this access, are able to potentially have a better living if they weren't having this access. And so I think that's really big for this. I think beyond it, for recovery, one thing we are thinking a lot about is how do we use some of these technologies to fundraise, to help with restoring buildings and kind of various infrastructure pieces, right? Because obviously a lot of it has been destroyed, and so coming in and actually being to crowdsource, fundraise, and restore something would be important, and opening this up to kind of the whole world. So it's not just, donation, but actually people can invest directly into these restorations and, have a return over time, but, in turn help Ukraine recover faster.
Mm-hmm. Now my next question is about Web3. This has been a buzzword for quite a while. What is your take on Web3 and NIA's role in it?
Yeah, so for me, Web3 is this idea that kind of the cost of change, cost of kind of switching costs should be extremely low. And so decentralization is a way to achieve that, right? If you have enough different servers, different entities, different wallets, different RPC nodes, different exchanges, the switching cost is low, right? And so you're able, if you don't, like, or one of them becomes, evil or value extracting, fee extracting, you can always switch. And so because this actually are all maintained in a more fair mode, and they're all competing kind of fairly with each other to attract more users. Right, and this is similar like how miners compete for a block, right, in a fair mode. Wallets compete for users, RPC nodes compete for apps. Like you have this kind of more even out plane. And I think that's kind of the core belief. And so within that, what NIR is aiming to achieve, right, in this Web3 is ability for people to control their assets, their data, and the power of governance. And so obviously assets is something that everybody agrees kind of, from the Bitcoin days. Data is really important because, again, if you have this control of data, then you have low switching costs because data belongs to you, right? Your Facebook data belongs to Facebook. Your Google data belongs to Google. Like, actually, this is your data. So it should belong to you, and then all the services can access to it on your, when you allow them, and then you have this low switching cost. And the final piece is governance, and this is a really important piece because, people need to have the vote and people need to have the voice to be able to affect how things are making, right? And this has especially been important in past months. Like the voice of people should be heard, right? It should not be kind of one party, one person, or deciding. And this is interesting to see also on the other side of this conflict, right? You have things like US deciding to ban SWIFT, which as a Ukrainian definitely support, but at the same time, as a blockchain and Web3, what we think about is how do we get the whole community to be aligned around some kind of, if we do want sanctions, if we do want it, it should be the whole community agreeing, not a single person or single entity deciding. So this is kind of the governance we want to go to. And I think we also saw that with all these companies kind of pulling out, being this community that actually decided, even though they could continue operating in Russia, they decided not to do it, to not pay taxes, to not fund the Russian army. So I think that's a mode we need to switch, and kind of what NIR is just a platform for people to build applications to deliver this mission.
But for this Web3 model to work, do we need mass adoption of solutions? And if so, how can we speed up this mass adoption process?
So our goal is 1 billion active users on chain in 4.5 years. It was 5 years at NIRCon. And so how do we do this? Well, we need a few things. We need apps that are actually really user-friendly, right? Simple to use. So Sweatcoin is a good example. There's a uMinter, which is Instagram-like, kind of reducing the onboarding cost, reducing need for people to understand seed phrases and private keys. We need security. So security is really important because right now people are scared. People, you buy an NFT, it goes in value in price, now you're scared that somebody will steal it, right? And people steal everybody, all kind of stuff all the time. There's phishing with, NFTs having backtrack on IP addresses, there's all kinds of stuff happening. We need to secure the users. We need to secure them through the wallets. We need to secure them through protocols, audits, etc. So there's a whole story there. And, well, we need scalability, right? to handle billion users. So I think this is, and kind of we, frame it as it needs to be simple, secure, and scalable at the end. And so that's, again, on the platform side, that's what we're building, but then it should be the whole ecosystem, right? It needs to be simple apps. It needs to be secure wallets. It needs to be kind of scalable infrastructure, not just on the blockchain, but also across the stack.
You mentioned scalability, you mentioned security, but when people talk about issues that the blockchain space is facing, another one that often is brought up is interchain communication. Do you think it's an important issue, and how is it possible to solve it?
I mean, it's a relevant issue for sure to simplicity and security to some extent, right? So for me, interchain communication is like, how do we make it simpler for users to use these apps, right? If you come into an app and this app is not on the chain you have assets on, right? Right now it's super complicated, right? You need to figure out what the bridge is, how to bridge, like it only supports fungible tokens. If it's NFT, it's super complicated. So moving closer where application can, you can work with any wallet you have, right? So, let's say you don't have Near wallet, you have MetaMask. Well, why don't you be able to use MetaMask with your Near app, right? Why doesn't the app themselves directly bring the assets underneath, right? Like you just deposit your, Ethereum assets directly on your app and it just delivers there. And so it's all possible technically. We just, need to continue building. Actually, Rainbow Bridge, the bridge from Ethereum to Near, already supports some of this. Like you actually are able to deposit directly into apps. And so some apps are starting to integrate that. But like we kind of need to push it further, right? Like you need to be able to own assets on Near with your Ethereum wallet. You need to own Ethereum assets with your Near wallet. Like all of those things, as more we enable them, the smoother this communication and kind of cross interaction happens, right? Similarly, 1inch can be running, the kind of finding the best trades across multiple chains and giving the kind of the routes, but then executing that kind of in parallel, like invisible to the user to some extent. And so like through that, you can enable a lot more of this connectivity.
Mm-hmm. What is your take on anonymity in crypto? Should crypto remain anonymous? Or there is an argument that anonymity leads to various kinds of nefarious and even criminal activities. What's your take on that?
So crypto right now is not anonymous. Like the blockchain in general is more transparent than private, right? It's a transparency engine. The consensus, what literally consensus means is everybody agrees on that they've seen everything, right? It's the same thing. And so right now, with having all the transactions kind of visible on the blockchain, it's more about creating this transparency. So we need to add privacy. We need to add privacy in kind of in the ways that are enabling like the use cases we believe in, right? Like it does not make sense that every single transaction is visible. At the same time, users willingly are able to kind of get KYC'd, for example, because they want to get some functionality, for example, recovery of their seed phrase, right? For example, like I don't believe, every single user will want, I know that for a fact, every single user wants to kind of store their own seed phrase. Like that's not true. People are willing to delegate to banks, to, some kind of multi-parties to have this if they're not able to withdraw your money, right? So like we can actually implement all these mechanics and through that have forms of KYC, forms of AML as well. At the same time, there's technologies and generally when we're talking about nefarious activities, right, there's always a second party, right? There's always it's not like, terrorists are farming Uniswap. No, they actually there's a transaction there, there's a second party. Similarly, like if they've, breaking some kind of current sanctions, there's a second party. And it doesn't really matter which technologies they use to deliver the value, right? It can be blockchain, it can be, suitcases of cash, and it can be trucks of gold, right? Like at the end, it's the second party. And so like world has been dealing with this and like there's ways to deal with this. And so we're going to continue and we should just enable some of the methods to with correct proofs for a community to decide when things should be stopped. So I do believe that some form of AML is important, but it should be based on proofs and based on community decision, right? So more broader votes kind of delegated or not through the community if some nefarious activity was detected and should be stopped.
Mm-hmm. And my final question is about regulation in crypto. What kind of regulation do you think would be most suitable?
So my pitch has been that we need the space, kind of protocols and projects to come together and build a so-called self-regulatory framework. So many kind of very innovative spaces that are regulated right now has developed the framework for regulations themselves, and they keep updating it themselves as well. And so regulators are just overseeing that this framework is implemented and maintained, instead of waiting for regulators to come up with new design of this, because they're just not able to as quickly adjust as the space is moving. And so because of this, we as kind of protocol developers and projects need to come up with, what are the first principles things, right? We want to protect the user. Like, nobody wants to scam the user. We want to protect investors. We want to create visibility around, projects that are legit. And so all of this is possible, and we actually have technologies to do this. We have blockchain to actually regulate blockchain projects, right? You can check in as a project your information, types of the token you use, types of tokenomics you use, right? That will be kind of classified, reviewed by the community, audited by auditors if the smart contracts, and now you have this information on a registry on the blockchain. And now wallets, and other like applications and parties can check this registry and verify that indeed this is a valid thing. And similarly, regulators are able to do this. And so through that, we can actually reinforce and make blockchain more secure, less rug pulls, less investment, kind of stolen investments, less potentially phishing and malicious activity.
Thank you for your insights, Illia.
Thank you.